Sorry, I should have done that sooner. But while we're looking at vision today, our agenda is going to be just a quick intro from Jim and I. We'll take a step back and look at high level what is the VTO, even though a lot of you guys are probably already in 90 and using it and have this filled out. But we're going to talk about some opportunities to go through and actually make it your own. So add some sections, edit some things, move them around. And then we're going to be able to chat about when do we update this, when do we revisit it? Like Jim said, very timely for where we are right now. A lot of people coming up on that annual season. And then we want to talk about bringing this to the rest of your organization. So how are you sharing it? How are you getting buy-in? And letting it really become a part of your company culture. So that's what we're going to hit today. Feel free to ask questions throughout using the chat button. And we'll have Q&A at the end, but we'll try and pick things up as we're going through too. So I am Christine. I'm head of client success here at 90. If you've joined any of these previously, hopefully you know who I am.
And I'm Jim Haviland. I work with the partnerships team, and I am the 90 coach. I coach and train all of our new recruits on running the business operating system and using the software to keep things running. So and I'm gonna talk about, and I just, I'm gonna say it a couple times. I put together a half-hour description of all the sections of the annual plan. So if you aren't working with a coach that's helping you figure out your annual, ping me and let me know you want that, and I'm happy to send that video out. It goes step by step. It is a half-hour long. You don't have to watch it in real time. You can watch it 1.5 speed or whatever. But if you're wondering about how to think about it, ping me for that, because it's having better annual plans. That's what I'm all about right now, Christine. It is pumpkin spice annual season still. So yeah, time to get that stuff right.
Well, and having one person on the team that really goes through something like that and knows like, hey, here's the best way to like really prep for this session and can help lead the team just makes a ton of difference when you're actually in the room.
It's a big investment to make, and you want to make sure you thought about things ahead of time, and you come in really ready to make some great decisions. So some forethought is warranted.
And so before we dive into what is the VTO, why are we talking about this? We've really already mentioned like, hey, it's annual season. Like Jim said, he's got the breakdown of the actual annual session that you will be doing. But a big part of that is the VTO, whatever your vision document is, and coming in and looking at these. But there's a couple other things that I'd love for you to talk through, Jim, about like why this is so timely and relevant.
Yeah, it's depending, regardless of who you go to. I was just reading an interview with a bunch of people talking about strategic planning and the 5 forces, that Michael Porter said, listen, every year you got to make time to take a real step back and look at where you're really heading. And it's not only where you're planning to go and but also where you're not planning to go, and setting yourself up with a really crystallized, as Gina likes to say, crystallized vision for where you're headed and how you're going to get there, and making sure it's written and presented it to people so they can also align to it, is so powerful to bring everyone together, because people will have different ideas. They will stray, and they won't necessarily go look at the VTO every time they're thinking about, oh, I'm going to do this thing, I should check the VTO first. No, they're not going to do that. So having that discipline of every quarter kind of realigning yourself to what you've planned to do, and then every year making sure it really still resonates, it's still written the way needs to be written, it still communicates everybody, and taking the learning from that year. It's like, hey, did we get off track? What took us off track? How can we be more, take what we've got and make it more applicable to staying on track? Because that's really the point, is that you've got a lot of, more humans you bring into the organization. It takes a little bit more effort to coordinate them. You got to make sure they head the same direction if you're going to get the lift from having those people. Otherwise, you get conflict instead. And we can exit it. It's completely avoidable if you make these kind of preparations.
Well, and that's why I love your next bullet point, because it's never about the people. It's not the humans that you brought on board. Like, they're not the problem. They're following the leaders. So like, oftentimes the leaders are the ones that are really guilty for taking the company like a bit off track and maybe chasing the squirrel here or there.
The annual is a time of reckoning. Did we get where we wanted to go? And the leadership team needs to fully own it. because either you didn't have a good plan, you didn't pivot appropriately, you didn't communicate it appropriately. Everything that happened, it's on you. It wasn't the people you hired. If you're got one of those cultures where you're going to blame somebody, you know, that guy we hired, it's his fault. You're broken, man. You take a deep breath, step back, take ownership of it. That's the only way you're going to move forward and really come up with a great plan for the next year. Just learn from that stuff. Make it, hey, it was a learning year, or hopefully it was some balance of winning and some learning. You know, it's one of the determinations that our good friend Chris Snyder always makes at the end of the quarter. You know, give it a grade, then tell me winning or learning, and to figure that out, because it is your fault. It is your fault as it, you know, whatever happened was on your direction. Just get better at it, man. You just get better and better. That's all. That's the whole point.
Every quarter, every year.
Every quarter, every year. Better and better. Because that is the leadership team's job. You know, we've got we have a couple of things that I teach my teams to always keep in mind. You're going to be leaders, building leaders. That's how you look at your people, but you're also really helping to figure out where the company has to focus and keeping everybody in that focus, right? So helping guide everyone so they see how the things that come up, I mean, regardless of what you write down in your VTO or whatever you have for a strategic plan, there's going to be, you know, things that people come up with, and you're going to have to help them interpret it. And it might take a minute, like, hey, I think I want to go do this. And like, does that really fit? I don't know. Let's think about it. Let's take it to the right level, give it proper consideration, and then feedback. Because we want to make sure we're really heading the right direction.
Yeah, and I think I threw in this last point here too, because it's not just like us saying this. There's a lot of, I pulled in the Harvard Business Review article that you linked to in another presentation, but this is just, there's so much out there that's reinforcing these concepts. And so we want to help show you like how you can make better use of 90 to really implement your company's vision.
For those high fact finders out there, especially in the coaching community, you all know everything comes from Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was like, from the very beginning, you've got to crystallize your vision down to a very simple set of things. You know, who your customers are specifically, what's the value you bring them, things like that. So he was the first one to say it, but every one of the systems since then have seen the value of that. It's not just about making sure people come to work and do the work they're supposed to do that day. They want to make sure they're connecting that work to that longer term vision. It's one of those things we know very well that that's how people feel engaged in their work. They have to feel autonomy. They have to feel like they can achieve mastery, and they have to feel like they have purpose. And giving them that purpose is your job as a leader in the organization. Helping them connect to that purpose long term is really where that's no one else can do it but you. Nobody else can help them find that vision except for you. So it's on you.
So let's talk about what that vision really is, and so how that translates really into 90. So I think we all probably know, like, the VTO, we've seen that. It's the high level overview of your company's vision and how to get there. And you've got the 2 pages in 90 right now. So you've got vision, and then you've got the second page dedicated to how we're making that happen, which is labeled as traction. But Jim, I'd love for you to talk about like this kind of concept as a whole, and like this is out there, and this is just like one frame of reference for it.
That's right. I mean, Gino did a great job of simplifying all the versions and coming up with one of his own. I teased him once about EOS is basically a greatest hits playlist where he changed the name of some of the songs, but he changed them on purpose. He came up with a very simple vision set of components and traction kind of components to help it really have that kind of funnel effect of, this is who we are. This is where what we believe in. This is how we're going to get there. Here's the things we need to know along the way, and get it all simplified down into a set of very digestible and understandable pieces that everyone in the organization can understand. But everyone's always had that. So Vern Harnish had the 2-page strategic plan. There was the 3 important questions. That was the original one that Drucker came up with, but every other systems has the same notion where you're trying to come up with a crystallized, simplified version of where we're headed. And the real power of this, Christine, isn't in the simplicity makes us all come to agreement. One thing we know is that you go into an entrepreneurial company, there's a million different versions of the vision. It's like there's no vision. There's too much vision. There's too many ideas about where we might go and how we might get there. And to get everybody on the same page with it, as Gino likes to say, to get everyone really aligned with what's the thing that we want to go do, what makes us different, and how are we going to really try to achieve what that thing is. And so, I think Gino calls this the, vision and traction. Other people call it vision and plan, strategic vision and plan. There's 3 HAGs, like so many of these different systems have come up with a different way of talking about it. And it's really about just giving it structure. So like, in EOS, we call the VTO the 8 questions. What are the 8 questions you have to solve? You've got to know your core values. You got to know your core focus. You got to know your target. You got to know your marketing strategy, 3-year plan, 1-year plan, core rocks and issues. I can do it, but I can now do it in 8 different systems. Christine, that's the crazy part. They're all laid out a little bit differently, but they all have the same basic thing where I have to really define that longer term thing that we're doing, making sure we're aligned on it and change it little by little. So the longer term stuff, you want to make little tweaks to on a regular basis once they're really solid, but then everything else supports that. Everything else is a way of moving us closer and closer towards achieving that. And that's what makes it that flag on the hill that we're all going to go towards is that maybe it makes sure that everything else lines up about it and everyone can clearly see the work I do today. That's ultimately where you want to get to. Hey, today I've got some to-dos that are actually milestones in my rocks. I know if I get those things done, I'm inching towards my ultimate goal. My BHAG or my 10-year target or my, what am I, my just cause, all of those different things we talk about as being way out there. Am I working on that today? I hope so. And the more I can make sure everything's structured the right way, then you can go with assurance. If I make this call today, I'm advancing my company towards where we want to get to, and we can all be pretty proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, it's whatever your organization is going to resonate with, agree with, get behind. I know we have I've worked with a client where they're like, well, we call it the blueprint. And I'm like, great. It doesn't matter. As long as you guys are all behind it, like call it the blueprint. That sounds awesome.
But that's really the thing, that you got to give important things have names. This is one of the things that Gino knows well, and Vern knew well, and all the newer systems on there. Our folks we just announced Empire, and of course we've had Pinnacle for a while. They give the important elements of their strategy and their plan names so that we can know exactly what we're talking about when so we all can align around it.
And so next up, I want to talk about, or you take it from here. Let's talk about focus filters, how it relates to what we're looking at as the VTO and some steps from there.
Yeah, so I mean, Gino, when Gino developed the VTO, he made some very specific decisions about what goes in there and what doesn't go there. And the genius of Gino's work is the simplicity of it, and all the fat's been cut out. So the very minimum you're going to need for be able to keep your focus, to filter out the things you're not going to do, and to keep you focused on the things you are going to do, are the things that that Gino put into the VTO. So you got to have core values, because that's the only way you're going to know who we are as a company. Who are we as people? Who are we going to bring in? When do we know to get rid of someone when they don't fit? So often, I tell this story all the time, Christine, but when I get hired by a client, and I say they got more than 50 people, if they've got more than 50 people in the company, every single time there's someone on the leadership team that I'm going to help them exit. That's part of the reason they need core values, because they don't know how to get rid of this person until we define the core values and realize that person doesn't fit. That's why they shouldn't be here. That's why it's so hard to talk to them. That's why it's so hard to get alignment with them, because it just doesn't belong here. And the kindest thing you can do to someone if they don't fit here, because if they don't fit, they're never going to be an A player in the organization. So you got to get to that. So that becomes the filter for who comes in and who stays, right? And every one of those has a filter quality to it. So we can do anything, we can't do everything. How do we know which things we are going to do? And all your focus filters are all those things. Core values is a focus filter. Your core focus or your just cause focus filter. What are the thing we're trying to accomplish? Does this get us towards that thing we're trying to accomplish? And what are we going to do to get there? What's the thing we can be best at in the world? Is this fit into that? And always it's a matter of, if it doesn't fit, is it because we wrote it wrong or because we shouldn't be doing this? But it brings up the right conversation. So filtering and those internal guiding mechanisms? What are the things we need to make sure that the right things are happening every day so that we're clear with everybody? Because that's ultimately the bottom line is clarity. The bottom line is turning our expectations into agreements, as Mark likes to say. How do we get to full agreement, full transparency, full understanding of exactly what we should and shouldn't be doing? And if we can be clear about that, everyone knows what to go work on.
Yeah, I like that concept that, purpose, passion, cause, niche, like those are like, hey, how are we focusing really company related, but core values is still a focus filter people related. So you need
100%.
everything to
Every
kind of
one
be
of these
something
things,
holistic.
yeah, helps us figure out what doesn't belong, and figure out what really does belong. Because you can ask the question, then what aren't we doing to achieve this, right? And then what are we working on that doesn't belong here, right? And so because that's, we talk about the other filter, the filter we use more often is it urgent and important? And it takes a while for teams to learn to be good at urgent and important. A new team will make everything a 5, everything's super important. Like, I'm thinking you're not filtering so good. Let's figure that out. Because you're visionaries. Everything's super important right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, I'm sure it's important to you, but is it urgent? Is it both those things? Does it have to be done right now? Is it, learn to sequence these things. So the filters are really so powerful. And the focus filters that go in and make up your strategy are the most important ones because they impact everybody. So you're going to spend time on them. How much time you spend on them, we'll talk about that when we talk about the annual plan.
Yeah. And there's 2 main components. So why you exist, and then also what you do as well.
That's right. And this was one of the things. So in the original version of mission, vision, values, right? That was what we talked about in the 70s. It became very popular. It was kind of the first kind of rewriting of the Drucker principles was, it became popular. Hey, we're working on our mission, vision, values. And a lot of bad mission, vision, values happened. The reason that I never talked to Gino about this specifically, but I'm pretty sure he renamed that stuff because those things, everyone had a different idea what they meant. So it's time to rename them so we can break with that. Values, we understand, core values, values became core values, but mission and vision became these components in the core focus of what is our purpose, cause, or passion, right? That would be and then that'd be the more vision part. Then the niche is more that mission. What are we going to do? What can we be best at towards getting there? What's the thing that we can really own in this world towards moving toward this thing? We believe in a world where this exists. And that longer term thing, that we believe in a world where this exists. That's like 100-year plan, just like a core values. You shouldn't expect those to change. Once you've locked those in, once you've captured those, and everyone's aligned to them, you don't want to be moving those around because you end up, that's a major shift for the whole organization. That is the Titanic part of you. You like completely headed the right direction all the time, pulling things along because people join with that concept. The niche part of it, where we're trying to figure out exactly what we're doing, that probably will migrate over time, both because the way we talk about it matters, and if your vision was people need to get where they want to go, and your niche was we make the best buggy whips on the planet, you probably want to change that because eventually buggy whips become not a big deal, and now you have to make something else that helps people get where they want to go. But those are 2 key components you can't leave behind. Mission, vision, values translates in EOS to core values and core focus. And it's just 2 important. Those are 2 concepts that minimum viable product on having a vision. You got to get that. You got to have those.
And while everybody here is probably going into the annual and going to be looking at the core values and looking at the core focus, I loved these examples that you had, because I think this is just such a great way to look at it, because they're all so succinct where you can remember it, and you want people to be able to remember it and go back to it and like actually be able to retain the information instead of 3 paragraphs about what you do,
Right. It's the word that Gino always uses. I like very just crystallizing it, getting it down to, in my slightly more erudite practice, I call it getting it down to the haiku. Like I don't need the novel. I need the haiku version of it that everyone can really remember. So that resonates, that really sticks to people. And in our instance makes me cry. So
yeah. So we've got 6 categories here of kind of how we're thinking about how companies position themselves around this. So I'll let you talk a little bit about this and then click through the examples too.
All right. So yeah, core focus for $100, please. So very much like, when we had the conversation we had about measurables, how we said, hey, you could look at anything and say there's a dozen ways of measuring it. Like, I'm going to make blueberry pies. Was it how many blueberry pies I make a day is most important, or to make certain quality, so I can only count the ones that have certain quality, or is there a process I have to follow to make the pie the right way, so it complies with the International Blueberry Pie rules. So same thing with core focus. I mean, you have different things that are really critically important to how you think about your business. So in Nike, they talk about it really comes from the sense of community to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. So their core focus was about, hey, we're a product at the center of this community, that building this community is what we really believe in, that we want to help people become part of. Our customers are people that really want to be part of this, the athletic part of themselves. And that really does drive. And you think about the way they market and the way they talk to the world, and the way they, the app they build, all the things like that really do, revolve around this notion that we're building the Nike community with every product we put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Marriott, I mean, this is really a brilliant one. A lot of people, I know people in this space, and it's so interesting to know that, yeah, we know that we have to make our people number one, so they can take care of everybody else, right? So the happy customers make for happy employees, make for happy customers. And because that's what they mean by the rest will follow. And we've documented this very, very well, but it was very ingenious to say, hey, we're going to create a great environment for employees to serve people, and then that will bring people back on a regular basis. So finding that in yourself takes time. It wasn't necessarily obvious. You can't, either with any of these, it wouldn't be the thing that was most obvious at the time. Oh, we do this, that's how we make money. But you got to step back, you got to step above it and really understand it from a larger perspective to see, what makes us excited about this stuff. 3M, they started with mining, right? So you would never have guessed they also make sticky notes, but that's because what was important to them was innovation. You never kill a new product idea. So taking what they're doing and constantly looking for that next innovation and inspiring that with everyone that works there. When you come to work there, hey, I want to work in this environment where innovation is the most important thing, and they're never going to poo-poo an idea before they consider it. And that's how you get a mining company that makes sticky notes. Is that we constantly have this strength for, oh, that's interesting. It's not our core market though. It's like, who cares? It's brilliant. So Starbucks, to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. Starbucks, there's so many places that could have gone, but they knew to stay true to the product by knowing who their customer was. This is a specific resource for our customers, and we know we can, and how we want to engage them, how we want them to feel when they're here. It becomes very much about the customer experience became the most important part of that. But there were lots of other people that were selling coffee, Christine. There was nothing hard to find a cup of coffee before Starbucks is around. But having that, what they call the third space, it's not home, it's not work, it's another place where you can go feel that human spirit nurtured. Everything they've done, from the locations to the way that the products they offer, the design of them is really about trying to get to that place. Boeing, I love these guys to eat, breathe, and sleep the world of aeronautics. So nothing, and you can see like the type of people that they bring on are these engineers. Everyone that's run that company for the last 50 years or so has been an engineer at heart, and they make engineering decisions, and they knew that was their best path forward. And then that greater cause to make people happy. It's and as a result, Disney doesn't have a lot. What have they gotten into? Anything that makes people happy, right?
Everything.
They're all over the place. But with the notion of it's not about, yes, we have to make money, but we don't start there. We start here. It helps you figure out who are your people. People get excited about making other people happy. And I don't know about you. I know lots of people that are just total Disney, believers. I mean, like
Yeah.
they'll go to Disney anytime they possibly can, and they find their happiness there. So good job, guys.
And I like showing this because I just think it's interesting to see the variations and like you guys going back and thinking about your own VTO vision through this lens of focus filters. Because it's like, well, Starbucks, it's a coffee shop. You could have maybe thought initially, well, they'd be under community because they have a lot of people in their store or whatever it is. But they're not focused on people making connections in there. They're making the one person have an amazing experience. So
That's right.
it's
It's
great
your
to have it laid
experience.
out like this
Right.
and see the differences.
And I wouldn't say that one or the other would have been the right strategy. It's just like, but they just chose one and went that direction, and it has impact, over forever, the forever part of their business. Forever, it has an impact, and it changes the kind of business you are. But none of these are about making money, right? That it's really about where do we sit in this universe? Where do we, what's the thing that we're trying to see happen in the world? And from that, you can draw a lot of inspiration for how you and what you do and what you don't do.
So I want to jump into 90 a bit and talk about how we can look at your vision and start making it your own with adding sections, moving things around. But before we do that, there's a few examples of additional things you might want to consider when thinking about your vision. So maybe you can just talk through a few of these, Jim, and then we can jump into 90 and see how those might be laid out.
Yeah, if you really want to run a great company and you haven't read Good to Great, come on, go read Good to Great. I promise you it's worth it. It's a well-written book. It's full of great stuff. Are some of the examples old? A couple of them are, but the point of them was that at the time they were absolutely accurate and dead on. So the hedgehog concept is really, it's the really being very certain about where, what you're good at and how you're going to get there. We make everyone read about the hedgehog concept before we do this setting, whether in the EOS model or a dozen other places. It's just reading that part of the book or reading an article about the hedgehog concept is really tremendously important. But it's really it's a lot of what Gino teaches about core focus comes from the hedgehog concept. It is the core material to go back to. But core focus is easier to manage than hedgehog, I guess. Your voice, this is the Stephen Covey version of it. Is really trying to find that that second part really speaks for so much to that more the niche part where like, well, what's the specific thing that we can do that's different from everybody else? How do we want to present ourselves uniquely in the world? And it, like I said, it's a Stephen Covey aspect, so it's very, very good. It's been used by a lot of people to figure out these things. And I've got plenty of clients that have voice as part of their vision because they just like the concept so much. They wanted to include that in how they think about things, and they bump up against it every quarter to say, hey, are we staying true to this? Dan Sullivan, if you haven't been turned on to Dan Sullivan yet, please go out and look Dan Sullivan up. He founded and runs Strategic Coach, the coach to all the best coaches in the world. He talks about unique ability, and that's really about when we talk about delegate and elevate, Christine. The idea of doing things you love and you're great at. That's really where this comes from. This notion of finding your unique abilities, which change over time, by the way. I mean, that's one of the reasons we delegate and elevate works, and no matter how often you do it. But the idea of really trying to get to the place where you're doing the things that you're passionate about, that give you energy, that don't suck energy from you, that you feel you can do well, but still have some mastery in. So, but being able to speak to that, great way to think about what you might do in your focus filters. If you're, especially companies that have a lot of passionate people in them, it's a great way of bringing all that together. And then SMAC recipe. This is a newer Jim Collins item. I seem to have lost my picture, but SMAC recipe, specific, methodical, and consistent. You can go look that one up. It is a great conversation about it on Jim Collins' website. But this is specifically for companies like 90 that have products. And if you want to make sure that you've got a specific set of things, the ingredients that make up your products have to fit with these constraints. Knowing that once again, to that, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. What all of our products need to fit within this world. We determined this is the world where we're going to inhabit and own and be great at. Smack Recipe is really designed specifically for that. Especially if you've got product development in your world, you might want to look at the Smack Recipe as part of what you do in your vision.
And we personally use Snack because it helps us, again, with that focus filter concept. How are we making decisions? And something like, we are only going to build products that serve the 80% of our client base's
Right.
needs, so we're not going off and building something for 10% of companies because they're X size, it's 80% usage. We're working on the small to mid-sized business market. And so it's like that kind of specific bullet points that we can have in there that's still helping us get to that focus aspect.
And when I take our new employees through that as part of the one of our sessions, I take them to the Smack. They're like, holy mackerel, that means it just like boom, lights go off. This is why we do this, not this. Exactly. So and it's there for everyone to see. And I say, yep, I'm going to introduce it to you, but this is something that your team, like the product team, you should definitely look at this on a regular basis. You go back and reassert yourself, reconnect yourself with it, and make sure that you're making decisions that really align with it. It's it's just something you just do once. You want to make sure you're doing it and you're incorporating it in a lot of decisions.
So if you did want to go in and add one of those sections, your normal VTO layout probably looks just like this. So you've got your core values, you've got your 3-year, everything on the traction page. If you want to add or rearrange any of these sections, there's going to be a settings button up here in the top right. So all of you guys should see that in your account right now. And if you wanted to go learn more about what this can do, it does link to a help article, so you can go through that a little bit later. But as soon as you turn this on, it gives you the ability to move things around, add sections, edit them. I'll jump over to another account where I already have things kind of configured at a base level. I know where a lot of companies like to start, which is having everything that's core values, purpose, passion, cause, marketing strategy, like big picture on one side. And then the second tab is more focused on those tangible aspects. So let's look at our 3-year, our 1-year, and our 90-day right next to each other. And if we wanted to layer in something like Smack, like this is focusing maybe on the vision portion. So we want to take a step back and look at it on the vision page. You can come up here to edit layout, which you'll see as soon as you toggle it on that settings button. And then you can come in here. You can see if I highlight over, this is what lets you move things around and rearrange them. But going into manage sections lets you actually add a custom section. So I can add Smack here. We make sure it's on the vision page instead of the goals page. We'll save it. Now we see it at the bottom here. So we can go through and like, maybe I want to resize this so it's the whole width. And as soon as I save this, I can come in and start editing it. So I can put in here whatever I want to.
Yeah, and very much like a lot of the sections here and I like this, is that you have the ability to drop a URL in there if in case there's a resource that you can want to bring into this and make it visible. Some images are actually, you can actually see them in here, like a presentation you'd see right away, or I think PDFs as well, right? Christine, you can see if you have a PDF somewhere you want to bring it in here. You can do it that way, but certainly ours at 90 is a we just brought the text from our Smack and dropped it in here. And now that is our official published place where the Smack lives. And when we make changes to it, that's where it happens.
Yeah, and I love that you called that out too, because I think so many people are visual these days, and we have a lot of people using this feature that actually put the image in there. So it's like, hey, I have this posted on my website, wherever it's hosted, and they can put in here whatever makes sense for their company. I don't know. There's a variety of different things, but
there's another Jim Collins, I think it's a Jim Collins tool called Flywheel, which is like looking at the 4 or 5 steps that where you add value. I do this for these kinds of people, then they do this, then it creates this. And that's it's meant to be a very visual thing. So having a way of dropping visuals into here is an important part of, this is how I communicate, because this is a communications device. So people ask about the marketing strategy. Well, there's not a lot to the marketing strategy, Jim, is there? Well, this is the part that you want everyone to know and understand. Everyone in the company should at least understand who your customers are and what you should be saying to them. Right? At the very least, everyone should know that, and you should reassert it on a regular basis. So just so you know, our target customers, the ones that are really going to love us and have the greatest value proposition for us, are these. And you go and this is what we say to them. This is what we think their uniques are. This is how we engage with them. Proven process is our guarantee. So this is really just to further make the point that this is your communication device for communicating these things out to everybody else. Like the core values. We know that you want to have a core values speech. You want to have a way of just talking about the core values in all the places you might use it. Like I interview against the core values. I say, hey, we've got a core value of GSSD. It means get smart stuff done. Here's what it means to me. Can you give me 3 examples of how you demonstrated GSSD in your work history? Because I explain, because you're not going to make it if you don't GSSD here. We do exit people for not, aligning to the core values, because it's the best way to love you. Hey man, you're never going to GSSD, but you're going to be great somewhere. I promise there's somewhere you're going to really fit in where that's not a requirement.
Yeah. And we did get a really good question. So talking about sharing this out and things like core values, like you said, everybody is going to see those and know we're hiring and firing against them. That's automatically shared with everybody. So right now in your account, the core values, the core focus, and the 10-year target are all automatically shared across every team in your account. We now have the ability where when you go into other sections, there's this cascade to all teams option. So for us, something like the SMAC, every team doesn't have a SMAC. This is for our company. We've made it specifically for that. So we can cascade this to all teams. And when we do that, it makes sure that when I go to another department, it's cascaded from the leadership team. There's no edit button here. So they're not going in and editing this for their specific department, but they can see it. So it is shareable in that way. And that's separate from this big toggle at the top, which if I go back to the leadership team, this is saying, I want to share the whole thing, which is a great place to get to. But if you're not ready for that and you just need to do the individual sections that cascade down, that's an option. So again, you just click edit and then cascade to all teams at the top.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because these are only going to be worthwhile if everyone does follow them, but you don't necessarily have to follow have your drafts go out to everybody.
Yeah.
But just know there's no power in them unless you really use them that way. That's the whole point. That said, different departments you can determine how you want to run things. Will have for certainly their own goals, right? So their own 3-year and 1-year plans, their own rocks. And so making sure that everybody knows that the standard for running their department is to have all of these bits, right? So what are your measurables? What are your, leading and lagging indicators? And then what are your plans and goals for that period? And they should all roll up and support the company vision, but at the same time, you've got your own stuff that you're working on that become part of your filters for figuring out where your rocks come from. Hey, we want to be this place in 3 short years. What do we need to do this quarter to be on track to get there? And so every department gets to have their own goal planning, and maybe some other stuff too. Certainly I've had clients that had multiple marketing strategies, and different departments owned different stakeholder groups, and so they had their own marketing strategy.
Yeah. And Gary, good follow-up question too. So this toggle, it does apply to all teams. So I don't have the ability to select which teams I'm specifically cascading it to.
Right.
But I think a good thing to remember is every team in your account doesn't have to have a vision page. It doesn't have to have a VTO. So if you don't want this page to show up at all, which is the case, like I've got one-on-one meetings with people that I've put in here as teams. So like the same page meeting, I've got cross-functional teams where it doesn't make sense to have a specific VTO for that. So in settings, under the teams management, if you make it a project, that just means I don't need a vision page. I don't need a VTO for this specific team. So I don't know if that solves your I only want to share it with specific teams question, but it might be a good option.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those ways you can kind of manage. Once again, the power in this stuff is making it so it's cascadable. It doesn't have to be everything. Like, as you can imagine, here at 90, our marketing strategy doesn't fit in this format. It's far more extensive, but having a simplified version of it that everyone can see is the point. So it is, hopefully you can find a way to talk about your purpose, cause, or passion that everyone can see at some point. And you're not hesitant to share that with everybody, because you should. I mean, to some extent, I mean, I know my team, we use it on every phone call. Hey, this is what are about. And if you're about that too, then we can work together. Because that's the power of it. Is it supposed to draw the right people to you? But that said, I mean, we do, in all my companies, we use project teams quite a bit to just kind of keep things focused, rein it in a little bit. It's just about a project. It's not about, this isn't the only thing, because typically those people are also in a department somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
and I think what you said is a great challenge as people go back to their annual, upcoming, and look at this from the lens of, is this something I can share with the whole company? If not, what can I do to get it there? What can I do to simplify to make sure that it is something that everybody would find useful eventually? Like you said, you're not going to share a draft out, but what are the steps that you guys can start taking?
Yeah, that's where it really creates value and adds power to what you've been working on. So I would encourage you to make that, to do that work. That is good work to do. That is valuable work to do. You will see an upside from it.
100%. And so we've been, I feel like, chatting about this a little bit throughout the session. So you're obviously going to be updating this, revisiting it, refining it. And you do this, you have your quarterly meetings that you go through as well. So why don't you talk a little bit about the quarterly, and then a little bit about how the annual is different from that, Jim?
Yeah. So in the quarterly, you want to spend as much of your time and energy on the more tactical. Hey, what do we need to, how do we do last quarter? And what do we need to do this next quarter to still be on track to reach our 1-year goals? That's basically what you're trying to do. And so the agenda includes mostly that stuff: reviewing last quarter's rocks and numbers, setting our next quarter's rocks and numbers, solving some key issues. But usually there is a little time in there for you to review the vision. And part of that's because I want to ask the question, amongst all these things, is there anything here from our current view that we need to make a change on? Does the language still resonate? Does it still align us? Or have we discovered anything? You're not necessarily going to solve it in the quarterly, but you want to raise those issues. You want to, on a regular basis, ask yourself the clarifying questions. Are these still our core values? Do they still represent the core of who we are and represent our culture? Are we doing everything we can to hire, fire, review, and reward against these core values? And every single one of the tools should have that those challenge questions that you're going to bump up against every quarter. And with my clients, I send them as part of the quarterly prep. I said, hey, go through these things. Here's the questions I want you to ask, and raise them as issues. And then if they're really important and we have to solve them this quarter to have a successful quarter, then we'll do so. We'll look at they show up in the long-term issues list, and we'll do them as appropriate. But if they're not, then they're going to flow to that annual, and it become part of that much larger reconsideration that happens at the annual session. Because at the annual is when you're even taking another step back. You're climbing, like say you're climbing the highest you're going to climb on the tree to look furthest out, and that's where you consider things like your SWOT. Like, where do I sit in the marketplace? Where are we as people in this organization? We're going to, on purpose, reset our 3-year and 1-year plans, because we've got another time frame to look out. But it's appropriate to spend some time looking at all the materials and making sure it's still serving the way it needs to. So because sometimes, yes, we want to make sure our core values last for 100 years, but we did this. I don't remember when we added GSSD, Christine, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it had to have been maybe a year ago, I want to say. But yeah, it was we saw a gap, and we were like, listen, we're not going crazy. We just need to add a core value here. And
we just need to add a core value.
The best one.
And Marcus came up with it on his own. And the funny part was, we were saying GSSD all the frickin' time.
Yeah.
Just GSSD. And the people that weren't really working out were the ones that couldn't GSSD. So oh, well, that's actually a core value. We should have asked that question up front. And now it's a great filter. Like, hey, it doesn't sound like you really get GSSD. I'm thinking maybe this isn't going to be a great place for you. Because you have to really love GSSD. It is our first core value. There's a reason for that.
And if you guys are prepping for your annual, I mean, one, take Jim up on his offer and get the deep dive video, of course. But we did cover it in last month's webinar. And I think,
Right.
a big takeaway from that was it's so tempting to shorten the 2 days.
Yes.
And when you do that, I think the vision side is what really suffers.
Yep.
And then in turn, the rest of the year suffers because you don't have those focus filters set up. So, you've got to spend the
Great
hour
call.
plus, the hour and a half plus on each day, like really hammering this stuff out.
Because it takes time. I mean, I think I know I covered this in the video, but you're not normally thinking in these terms. If you get to the place and you've built a company, let's maybe just for an example, and you called it Amazon, and you basically own all retail on the planet. If you're if let's say your name is Jeff Bezos, what you're doing every day is making 3 great decisions that impact the company 20 years from now. He actually said that, but you got to rise to that place. And if you're not there, you've got less and less time you spend thinking that far out, but you got to find that time. Give yourself the opportunity to think about the term, once you've gotten to a point of stability, once you get, past the place where you're, hey, we've got some product market fit. We kind of know where our products are, our customers are. Now we've got the time, we've earned the right to look further out. And now when we make decisions, we can make decisions based on someplace we're all headed, as opposed to, when you're in survival mode, you don't spend time on this, Christine. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got some baby companies I'm helping, not baby companies, they're very young companies. They haven't found product market fit yet. They're still trying to figure it out. But they're crawling, they're not running. So let's not spend time talking about 10 years from now, because it doesn't make any sense. I've got a client that I've been getting ready. They're a crypto company. A lot of things have happened in their market over the last year or so. So we were going to do an annual. They said, no, we're probably not time. I said, I agree. It's not time.
Well, yeah, go ahead. And so let's, I guess, go over the agendas a bit. And then I'd love for you to dive into that, like, okay, the 3 year and the 1 year and the 90 day, like that's a significant amount of time in the annual. So let's talk about that too.
It is. So here's the quarterly agenda, next the 2-day annual. And this is to Christine's point. We look at the vision and plan. If you're running on EOS, it's VTO, that 1 hour. We get 1 hour for ourselves to look back and consider that stuff. And it's basically enough time to go through and ask the questions. And like I said, I like to have people like prep for this ahead of time, so they've thought about it. So we're not listening to crickets while we're going through this stuff. But it's just an hour. And if you do the 1 day, and I tell you, I don't have any clients that get to the end of the quarterly and go, gosh, I wish we hadn't spent so much time, right? It doesn't happen. So you're going to use all that time if you're trying to accomplish things. Now, when we go to prepare for the annual, there's a couple of things that we add in. So I think this builds out, Christine. So the things that are different in here, first of all, there's a big bunch of time for team health. Listen, you can be very successful and be very unhealthy. Okay, I'm not telling you that team health is going to make you successful, or you can't be successful without it. But it just makes everything so much easier when you spend some time. And Gino has some suggestions of things to do during the team health time. Once you've been through it a couple of times, there's other things that I always used to do. We always add another method of profiling, right? That's why if you have a Zoom with someone at 90, they're going to have their Colby and their print and their Myers-Briggs. Sometimes some of us have our culture index in there as well. So, but learning on something going into this time is valuable for everyone that ever does it. No one's ever done it has ever said, gosh, I wish we wouldn't have done that. So spending time on that, when you cut that down, you'll lose. That's the first thing that goes. And oh my gosh, that means that difficulty in communication you've got right now, any kind of, I'm not really certain if that person's completely on board, all those feelings you're going to put them off for another year. So if you want to deal with that, do some team health time. Organizational checkup. This is, doing something that gives everyone a sense of how strong the organization is and all the things you think you should be strong about. So EOS has a very specific one. You can go to organizationalcheckup.com and do it for free. And then you do your whole organization that way and have everybody, and look for those places where you're strong or weak, based on the same kind of model that Gino laid out in in this, the 6 key components part of this talks. And it can be powerful for looking for those things. So team health is like, are we working well together? The organizational checkup is the organization healthy, right? How healthy is that?
Right.
And then we start with this idea of like looking the furthest out. So SWOT is like you're really way out there. What, in the outside, where does this organization fit in the world? Competitors and other things that might go wrong that get in our way. SWOT is sometimes considered like the starter version of doing 5 forces planning. The Michael Porter concept of really getting your strategy down. But it's something. Just an hour once a year, we're actually thinking about where we sit in the market. That's one of the things that goes away as well, almost always when you do this. And SWOT is valuable because it helps you find things you're going to put in those 3-year and 1-year plans. In fact, when I do it with my clients, Christine, I actually make them say, okay, is this going to be something that's important in 3 years, in 1 year, really long term? So we start to know which things to scan over to pull out and put things on our 3-year plan or a 1-year plan. Then you get that same hour for vision and plans. So yes, we look at all this stuff, but it's the same thing. We're scanning through to kind of create issues that we're going to solve, right? Then we start digging into the 3-year. And we'll talk about this more in a minute, but that notion of the 3-year plan is really so important in kind of drawing that line from 10 years out, which is part of your vision and plans review, the VTO review, like my 10-year target or my BHAG, whatever you want to call it, to 3 years to 1 year to a quarterly. You'll notice it's kind of in thirds or fourths, right? So having that, anyone that's been a fan of our events knows my the picture I draw of the looking down the road and towards the horizon. You got to know that at 3 years, the first one that looks like it's actually running a business. That 10-year one, it's kind of like, yeah, we're going to come up with something we're going to try to accomplish in 10 years. But 3 years is the time horizon where I really start to say, okay, if that's going to be true, this much revenue, this much profit, your lagging indicators, these things should be true, my measurables, my leading indicators, and then some specific plans I'm going to try to create. And the same thing with the 1-year plan, the same format, same kind of thing. So, and you got to have those to do a good job of setting your rocks for the coming year. Otherwise, I've got teams that I started out with, they're not quite ready for 1 year or 3-year planning, and they don't know what to do with their rocks. I mean, the rocks are harder to set because what do I need to accomplish? What's urgent and important? Well, that comes from your 3 and 1 year planning.
Yeah, and I love that this funnel, it follows the same cadence of these 2 meetings as well. And a lot of times, I'll create a bunch of issues that I think are going to be rocks for myself. And then by the time you get to that second day and you've thought about the big picture, you've thought about where you're going to be in 3 years, where you're going to be by the end of the year, and you're like, well, I don't think that's the right thing, for this quarter.
Right.
So it helps you get there.
The clarity, it really, this process, I mean, Gino did a great job of laying this out, and, kind of like starting from, the team health, like, are we working well together? Let's first get that figured out. Let's get some more interactivity better, and then figure out where the organization's healthy. Now I can start looking at that giant picture and have great conversations about it. And, and you feel you're more able to be vulnerable and say, oh, this idea I had for a rock, I feel like I'm part of the team. So, and we're aligned to where we want to go. That's not important anymore, right? As opposed to a pet project. Which is without that, that's where you end up, is with people like, well, I really wanted to get this done though. Does it really serve the larger purpose? Are we really connected to what the company's trying to accomplish?
And so let's see, I guess before I dive into how you're going to share this out, which we touched on a little bit already, do you want to go look at the 3-year,
Sure.
1 year, and 90-day all lined up next to each other?
Sure. So this is, by the way, Jim Haviland's favorite way to look at this. I don't know about you, Kristen. It's always my favorite, because it does give you that view across the business over these horizons, right? And this notion of how things are going to grow, and you can start to picture the fact that, I've got a couple different ways I measure revenue, and some of my clients, by the way, Kristen, are hesitant to share revenue and profit. You got to find a way of talking about it, because in lieu of saying something, people make assumptions, and you really gotta talk about how you're succeeding as a business. And come to the way of talking about it. So when I teach my clients is revenue is about having choices. We can go do the things we want to do if we're creating revenue, right? Revenue is about giving us the freedom to accomplish what we want. If we don't have the revenue, nothing's going to go move forward. Profit is about resilience. If we're going to be able to withstand the inevitable bad things that happen, we have to have profit. That's no one's going to give us money to keep going and even generating revenue if we don't have profit. So that's the way at 90, obviously we're in growth mode. So, and we're venture funded. So profit means it's something different to us. But at the same time, we know we have to have some amount of cash in the books to be able to make the choices. So having a way of communicating these to everybody that you feel comfortable about, be able to disclose, will go a long way towards developing trust with everyone in the organization. But these are your lagging indicators. These have already happened. So do build out your model so you can be relatively, you've got a reason to believe these numbers. Don't let your visionary come up with these numbers at the top of their head. Have somebody who's good with spreadsheets figure out what these things are, because there are implications of these numbers. And that's the whole point. To get this, what's revenue? How many customers do we have to have? How many products do we have to produce that year? How many stores do we need? Like things will come out of these that you should be planning against. Oh my gosh, if we're going to get to that size, we're going to have to hire at this pace. Are we going to be able to do that? Maybe we got to have a different way of thinking about this, or, oh my gosh, we're going to cross over this boundary, which means we have to have these kinds of benefits. There's all kinds of reasons to think about this stuff, but the structure at the top, revenue profit, should give you your starting mark for thinking about the scale and scope of your business. All right. So get those relatively right. Use a spreadsheet to figure out what they should be. And you'll go back and forth between that and your metrics. Your metrics are those things that these are the leading indicators, the things that say to me that the business is doing well, even if my lagging indicators don't make sense. Like I had a bad quarter with sales, or I had to take a big hit because I had to pay out for this thing, so I didn't make profit. That's going to be okay as long as these leading indicators, these metrics, how many customers, how many contracts, how many stores we've opened, things like that. Those are things and predictors of future success. And you want to have a set of those that really make sense to you, and start to rationalize across these. Is there a great big swing here? Is there a giant change in progression? If so, if Jim Haviland's your coach, he's going to make you account for it. Like, how are you going to make that happen? How's it going to be different? Your trajectory is this. You want it to be up here. You better be taking some rocks to make up that difference, my friend.
Well, and I think that brings up an interesting point too, because a lot of people are tempted to make these different. Like, oh, well, in 1 year, I'm going to track this. And then in 3 years, I'm going to track a totally different number. And you want to track the same thing across the board because you want to see how you're growing. How are you going to actually achieve that thing in 3 years? And if you're not tracking it in the 90 days and in the 1 year, there's not going to be any visibility around it.
That's right. I mean, we manage what we measure, right? So, and getting down to this, to alignment around what's really most important about your business. What's the most important thing? Is it number of tires? Is it number of customers? Knowing that is knowing your business engine. You got to figure out what the most important engine of your business is. And people that can't do that tend to not be able to describe what their customers are. Right? Oh, we like all these customers. Like, no, tell me who the perfect customers are. The ones they're going to find the most value for you. Michael Porter would be all up in your grill about this. He says there's certain kinds of customers who are going to find a lot of value in what you do. They're going to give you the most profit. Figure those out. The more you can be specific, you'll take the other customers. We call those pearls on the beach. You walk around the beach, you see some pearls, and pick them up. Okay. But the ones you're going to go after, the things you're going to spend your precious sales and marketing resources on, be specific about that. And then be specific about how you measure it to communicate to everybody else that these are the most important things that we have to achieve. These are the most important numbers, right? Because that brings everyone into focus.
100%. And then when it comes to the how do you say it? It's not the actual numbers, but it's what does it look like? Where are you trying to get to? Like, what are the actual goals here? I know for us, we often put people's names next to them. I think it just helps with that sense of ownership and saying like, I am the one that has to figure out how to get here in this amount of time, whichever one it may be. You associate rocks to an owner, so why not continue and carry that up? I think is also like a powerful concept that we've done here at 90, and I'm looking forward to when you actually can select that in-app too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's, ownership is important. I mean, accountability is, healthy accountability is what we're trying to get to for everybody. And making sure that we're looking at these things. If we feel like, gosh, we have to have this thing and true to be true 3 years from now, there's a natural progression of what do I need to accomplish this year to be on track for that? What do I need to accomplish this quarter to be on track for that? Some things take that long of an arc. Some things are going to be hard to put names against because it involves everybody, but do the discipline of thinking about who's going to be tracking against it, who's going to ask the question, who's going to make sure that we haven't forgotten about it. Because in the best companies, the best run companies, in these 3-year plans, they get longer every year. So
Yeah.
let's go into that part of it. So when you first started, you're looking at, you're starting to set your new 3-year plans. Almost always you're starting with these same ones, right? So did we accomplish these ones? If we checked it off, amen. If it's done, fantastic. If it's not done yet, what does it look like more clearly now? Is it 2 years out? And so you put a year against it, and that's have to either by there. And then you want those descriptions to read like book reports. What are all the materials? What are all the thinking we have behind this that help us get there? Because that's what you're going to create rocks from. And you want that rock to be already have all that research and all those thoughts and all those constraints in it. Because once again, those all become the focus filters of how you're going to accomplish your rock. What does done look like? Well, it looks like we're going to do this, this, and this. And it just makes it so much easier to be really efficient with how you go and conceive these things. And you haven't lost track of any of the thoughts. Just capture them here. And in the right moment, you'll look at them again. And when you get really mature, my friends, you will be constantly adding to your 3-year picture, but constantly enhancing that thing with things that we learn along the way. So when we come back and look at it again, it's a super smart thing.
Definitely. And this is pulling in the rocks that you have marked as company. So I know, Brenda, it looks like you had a question/comment where when you're toggling on a leadership rock as a company rock, it doesn't make it a company rock. So I think you might want to make sure that the main team is the leadership team. So this list that you'll see on your vision, on your VTO, is pulling from the rocks page, and it's pulling from the leadership team rock. So this list is only going to be ones where the primary team is the leadership team. So if that's the case, you might want to just make sure it's not something that's just simply shared with the leadership team, but it's actually, this is the primary owner. And then you can share it out to the other teams as you wish. Yeah.
And here's Brendan, one of the things that's important to remember is like having your name on a rock doesn't mean you do all the work. You're the steward of the work. So if you want a rock to show up on the leadership team, someone on the leadership team has to own it, right? And then all of you can see here milestones. The milestones could be owned by anybody. But if the leadership team wants visibility to how that rock's moving forward, and that's what the company rock means. Company rock means it's the most important. It doesn't mean that it's the whole company working on it. It means it's one of the most important things for us to get accomplished this quarter. And so if that's true, if the company's really relying on this rock being accomplished this quarter, then you want to make sure someone on the leadership team owns it and owns making sure it gets done, even if they're not doing hardly any of the work. And we see that plenty in our organization. So all the milestones might be owned by Jim Haviland, even if it's Chris Snyder's rock, or more than likely Michelle. But that's okay, because we want leadership team to have a chance to see it. They want to track it, make sure that they understand that whether it's progressing or not, because they want to know whether it's not progressing. And that becomes Chris's most important job, is to say, hey, I'm going to make sure the resources are available for this rock to get accomplished because it's company rock, and I'm going to raise the flag. I'm going to ring the bell if something's going to get in the way, because we're all going to rally around it, raise an issue, and then put appropriately resource whatever solution might be, which might just be reconfiguring the rock, but that's a story for another day. Does that help, Brenda? Hope that helps. Yeah. So Same thing with, department rocks. It's the same kind of structure where you can create department rocks for anybody. And it just means that it's the most important thing. It also means that those rocks get done before all the other ones. Not before in timeline perspective, but if you got all your rocks done and someone on your team didn't, had a company rock and didn't get it done, then I throw the chair still at the quarterly. I in a very loving way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I think it's a great
company
point.
rocks, you said it's the most important thing. Why didn't it get done? Why did you get your rocks done and this one didn't get done? That means you're not really paying attention at the weekly meeting.
Yeah. And in that weekly meeting, if you're talking about a rock, the owner's got to be in the room, So I think it's a great point. Use that milestone function. These go out to anybody in the company. So this is all the users in your account. It doesn't have to be associated with the individual team. If a person does own a milestone, they can still see this rock, even if it's not on their team. So they still have their individual portion. They still have the context as a whole. So you should be able to share that out accordingly.
I take a company rock assigned to me and reassign it to a different manager in another team.
Yeah, if you do not need it on your leadership team anymore, you can definitely switch the team and then move it to a new person. So you have that functionality here. So I can go through, put it on the marketing team. It would take this away, and then I can reassign the owner to whoever's on that marketing team.
Yeah, but if you want it to have company visibility, company-wide visibility, then it has to, someone on the leadership team has to own it. And I think it's a larger topic we can get into, but and this is that's a pure EOS notion of this, but I know Pinnacle follows the same way, and I'm pretty sure Empire does, where it's really about getting good at understanding that everyone's efforts need to kind of roll up to these company rocks to great extent. But if the leadership team is going to have visibility to it, someone on that team needs to own it. They need to be able to represent it in that meeting and say, yes, I'm tracking with it, on track, off track. And hopefully they're meeting with the people that are actually doing the work to make sure they understand it. But your milestones are ever more important that way. And when I see that happening in my clients, I just tell them, you need more milestones, because the more kind of complexity you add to who's going to be doing the work and who's going to be seeing the work, the more you need to, formally structure what happens. And you probably need a same page meeting across everyone that's working on that stuff to make sure it gets coordinated, especially if it's a company rock. If it's a company rock, definitely create a project team for that so that you can make sure it gets done.
And even if the milestone is not something that's like a big significant moment, but when I'm creating my rocks, it's like, oh, I need this person to think through X, Y, Z and provide some feedback. It's not like, oh, this is going to be done by this date, but I need them to generally think about this rock. Is it attainable? Provide some feedback. Like, it's okay to have some early milestones that are like that, where you're just getting other people involved, I think is smart.
That's a great call. I mean, it's one of the things I tell my clients all the time is like the first couple milestones put in there. Think about all the people that need visibility to this and whose input you need to have and whose alignment you need to have to actually make this a success. Get them on there right away so that you give right structure, and you can usually get them to help you out too if they think it's important.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you there, Brenda. Like, if the leadership team member owns the rock, they definitely need to be bringing in those other teams. Like, I think every single rock I have is shared with at least 2 teams, so I'm pulling in other departments. I set up a client success data team meeting. So it's like we meet in there every week. And that's something we just created this quarter because we had so many rocks around data needs. So I think, needs might shift, and you might find
your
things
job and turned it into 4 different departments, Christine.
Yeah. But I think we're happy to meet with you and kind of talk about your specific account too. And that's something that our client success team does all the time. So feel free to reach out and we can get you on a call with the client success manager too.
Although it feels like maybe there's a rock webinar coming that to go over some of these details.
It's another big topic. I feel like during that quarterly annual season, everybody's like, what are my rocks? Like, how am I setting them up? I didn't get them done last quarter. What am I going to do different? It's just.
No, tough. It's a good point. I mean, and I think it's a good time to kind of reconnect yourself with the teaching on how things get done. Because people miss that, they when you own the rock, you own getting it done. You're the steward of the rock. You're the, you're the oversight of it, of the work, not the doer of the whole thing. And that's,
Yeah.
people miss that. People miss that quite a bit.
I mean, and it's interesting how it even ties into this webinar too. If you think, all right, if there is a company rock, a leadership team member must own it because it's that important and it's filtering into one of our focus filters, I imagine. And we've chosen it because it fits those guidelines. So it's all connected, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one of the things that some of my clients are done. They've actually come up with their 1-year plan. They come up with theme names for each of the things in 1-year plan, and they use that all bold in front of the rocks that align to that thing.
Oh, nice.
To create that connectivity between yeah, exactly. So there's some 1-year plan thing that's named theme. And this is one of the things towards that. And you could have multiple rocks in a quarter that are all towards building towards that thing.
Yeah, I like that. And then each page has the search, so you can go and look through ones that are specific to that. That's cool.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, what did I miss here? Sharing and getting buy-in. State of the company is a great one. And in state of the company, you're also going to share out what your company rocks are. So this is another great time to say like, hey, I'm owning this rock as a leadership team member, but I need all of these departments' help. I'm going to loop in these people. So I think at the company level, you're giving visibility to the vision, and the vision includes what those company rocks are too.
Yeah, I mean, and I think someone else mentioned like, hey, you can also, I mean, hopefully some of the departments will take rocks in support of that rock too. I mean, whether you're just taking milestones or you're actually doing, okay, here's the thing we're going to do to make that rock more successful. So, but the state of the company is an important part of the communication strategy. It's an important part of like, let's come back together. Let's all realign around our core values, and let's, do core value shout outs, and let's talk about where we're headed. And, I mean, especially as we get to this place where if you're a bigger company or if you're more remote, the state of the company becomes more and more important. Don't sell yourself short on that one. Spend some time together. It matters.
I have shared in 90 is the next one. So I already showed you that toggle on to share, and you do have those two options. I'm glad that question came up. I might have forgotten to point that out. But you can share it with everybody. So let's say, hey, I've gotten the stamp of approval. My VTO is done and I want to share it with everybody. Toggle that on. If not, go through, pick the sections that you feel like are done, ready to present. Hopefully that's at least your core values and your core focus. But you can go through your other sections and see what else you'd like to share as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I did throw in there, when you're sharing this, invite everybody in your company as observers. It's totally free. It means you don't have to figure out how to print this out and waste all the paper. It's, hey, they're in 90, they can come in, they can view the VTO anytime. They can see the accountability chart, which is another great resource. Maybe you've built out some of the process section. So it's a great way to bring some additional visibility to the rest of your team.
That's right.
And then my third one, run your quarterly discussions. I feel like I've been talking to people a lot about this recently.
Yes.
It automatically pulls in your core values. So you're having that manager and direct report conversation once a quarter. If you come into the left nav, you have the feedback or one-on-ones page here. And this just lets you come in and have that conversation between two people where you're going to be able to look at that person in terms of the core values and have that right fit conversation right away.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had anyone say, gosh, we spend too much time talking about the core values.
Yeah.
I've had the other problem where people, plenty where we don't talk about them enough, people don't know them well enough, or we have aspirational ones that aren't really real. And so we were embarrassed to talk about our core values. Don't do either of those things.
Yeah. And then I think, I don't know how to like quantify this, but you've got to figure out a way to keep it handy. Like when you're talking about an issue, deciding if a rock is like still a priority, like you've got a decision to make, you have these focus filters, hopefully you've set up really well. And just let yourself go back and reference those. I don't know if you have any tangible tips around that, but it's just got to be like one of those things where you just like got it on your desk. It's something where you can see it and access it.
Yeah, I mean, so the more you're doing all your working on the business work in 90, the more it is obviously right there and you can go back to it. But the other part of the value of making it simpler and simpler and more memorable is that you don't have to actually look for it to make those decisions. There's things in there that will, like I know our BHAG inside now. So I'm always with my team, I'm constantly will say, we wouldn't do that because we want to be one of the most trusted brands in the world. Like, right. Yeah, that could help us maybe get to 10 million active users, but it's not going to help us with getting one of the most trusted brands in the world. So that's a no.
Yeah.
Hard no on that one. And it brings clarity. I mean, it isn't just like me saying no. It's like, we're not going to do that because, and now we all know, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to reassert that. But making it really super simple is the very best thing you can do. And that takes time and energy. It takes, effort. You got to dig into it. And if it's not something that resonates, if the language doesn't resonate, make it an issue, talk about it at your annual and get that solved. If it's really a problem, but also recognize if it's a problem and talk about it in your quarterly. I mean, these things are important tools for us being successful. So it's worth putting the time in to make them really do the work they need to do for you. And that is bring clarity and focus. All right.
Kind of already showed you feedback. I think this is just the biggest way where it's going to be a part of everybody's normal conversation. So outside of your leadership team meetings, I think Brenda brought up a great point of like, she's got departmental VPOs. And so that's one way where the rest of your company is going to be able to like get that honed in for themselves and be able to see it and actively participate in that. And another way is just that feedback section where you can come in and have those one-on-one conversations and pull in the core values into that too.
Brenda's got another question for you there, Christine.
Right.
Leadership sometimes feels like we said it was going to be a rock and it didn't get done, or it wasn't really the best project for that quarter. They tend to not want to roll it over. First off, best practice, the impurity EOS, we don't roll over our rocks. If it didn't get done, it becomes an issue, and we prioritize it yet again for all those reasons.
I think that reassess mid-quarter is a great question because it's something we've had to deal with. And I think the main thing is like, make it be a significant moment. So don't let yourself every quarter to get 2 months in and be like, oh, well, like this isn't really happening anymore. Like it needs to be an event happened and we all talk about it in the meeting and say, we're all going to go look at our rocks right now because this thing that just happened is crazy. We're prioritizing it. This is important. Let's see what's not important anymore. So make it a team discussion and saying like, this is a moment right now we need to address instead of just, oh, it's the rocks check-in. We're 2 months in and like, yeah, like, I don't know if that's important anymore. I feel like there's a difference there.
100%. I mean, it's got to be about alignment. It's got to be, and hopefully one of the reasons we ask people to do milestones up front is because sometimes the rock is like, oh, it's just too big. We're not going to get it all done this quarter.
Right.
And so the sooner you know that, bring it back to the team. I think this is as far as I can get on this. Is that okay? And have that discussion, have a real discussion about it. We all said this was super important, but I think we can only get this far. Do we still want to move forward with it? And have like, well, would it be better just to wait later till this other thing is true and we could do it? That's the right conversation you want to have. And knowing that we want you, compared like rocks, the disciplines around rocks to like OKRs, 80%, 70%, right? In OKRs, they expect you to only get 70% of what you plan to get done in the OKR done. In rocks, we say, make smaller rocks. Don't bundle your rocks together. Make them, rock size, not boulder size, and get 80% of them done. And then that would be the bar, right? So knowing that some rocks are not going to get done, or you're going to realize aren't that important, and we're just going to let it go, and that's fine. And like, don't worry about it. But if you're finding doing that a lot, yes, you need to understand why. Why did we not scope the rock right? Did something major change and that rethink things? Hey, back in March of 2020, I called all my clients and said,
Yeah.
Forget about your rocks. Forget about your 1-year plan. We're going to go into a monthly half day scenario for free. I just want to keep you alive, my friend. So let's figure out how to thrive in this moment. Don't pretend this is going to be gone a little bit. I don't know how long it's going to last, but if we go back 100 years, it took a couple of years for us to get rid of the Spanish flu. So let's just understand that we got to be who we need to be in this moment, and that every business is going to face things like that. It doesn't have to be a global pandemic. It can just be suddenly changed to one of your trading partners, or someone really critical in the organization leaving, and suddenly we have to or you lost a major client. That would reconfigure your priorities, and you should. Making great decisions for your business is the point of all this, and giving you the framework to make it easier to make great decisions and then do something about it. That's what we're trying to get done here. So know that you can make decisions, you can redirect, just do it intentionally and do it with collaboration, so you're all aligned, and then you all own the outcomes of those things.
Yeah. And it comes from you're sitting in the meeting and you can't know everything when you're setting your rocks. It's impossible. And so you're going to go back, you're going to make them smart, after a week or two, and then say, like, this is my plan. And it's going to change a lot of the time. And if you can have a phase 1 and phase 2 of your rock, if it's an event and you just go back and say, like, is this a priority at all anymore? Hopefully focus filters and your team will help you get there in terms of alignment.
Yeah, poor Brenda, that they don't allow any rocks to not get done. Brenda, I tell my clients it's mean. They'll always tell me, "Oh, we have to be 100% on this." No, that's just mean. You don't know what's going to happen. Don't even. Do you like to beat yourself? Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not the planet I live on. On my planet, things go wrong all the time.
Save the video. We're recording it. We're going to put it on YouTube. You're going to send it to them. It's all going to be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all I got. I know we've been kind of chatting through questions here, which has been great. So I don't know if we need this slide. I'll just say, if you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We're here to answer them.
All right. Yeah, April, I'll get you out my video. I'm just Jim at 90.io. If anyone else wants the my annual prep video. If you're working with a coach, your coach will probably have something for you. But if not, I'm happy to share mine. Mine's a little bit on the long side, but I'm Yeah, sure, Gary. That sounds fine.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Any other questions out there?
Well, thanks, everybody. Good to see everybody. Hope you have great annual sessions. Set some great rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Get 80% of them done. And Christina, as always, a pleasure.
Yeah. Always good to see you. It is, thanks for joining. Appreciate your time, and we'll be back next month for the last one of 2022.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.